Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the premiere showing of the Port Hawkesbury video, A Glimpse of the Past, A Look to the Future, here on SAERC TV.
Despite periodic setbacks in the fishery and the decline of shipbuilding as wooden ships were replaced with steel, by its incorporation in 1889, Port Hawkesbury was a thriving community. This map by A.F. Church, registered in 1884, gives us a good picture of the times, the numerous wharves and the settlement pattern, mostly centered on Granville Street. Port Hawkesbury, A Glimpse of the Past, tells us that along the Port Hawkesbury waterfront at that time, there were no less than 9 wharves, most of which were totally dependent on shipping and fishing. The fishing grounds off Inverness County could only be termed as excellent. In the early 1890s, as many as 100 to 125 vessels, the finest of the American and maritime fishing fleets, could be found in Port Hawkesbury Harbor because it was known as a safe harbor. In the winter months, repairs were done to many foreign vessels, supplies were purchased, and crews were hired. At the time of incorporation, Port Hawkesbury had the huge population of 658. It was a bustling little town. The town could boast of 3 hotels, the Scotia House, Acadia House, and the American Hotel. There was also a post office, telegraph office, customs office, and a variety of stores, including the first drugstore in Inverness County. In 1989, Port Hawkesbury celebrated its centennial and attempted to capture the spirit and excitement of the earlier times. Here, Barb MacIntyre talks about a special centennial project, the Centennial Quilt.
Down in the corner we have the Old Town Hall, and this was done by Paula Davis. The Farquhar House was done by Priscilla Landry. Fish plants showing horse racing on the ice was completed by Kay McCachran. Industries within Port Hawkesbury that have, some are still here, some have come and gone, was done by Teresa Rusi. The creamery was done by Joanne Beaton. And the last block represents music in Port Hawkesbury, completed by Jenny Curry.
Bill McKee, co-chairman of the Centennial Celebrations Committee with Barb, tells us about the centennial activities.
Yes, we had a number of very interesting activities. The Canadian Legion held a convention in town during that year, which was widely attended from people across the province and beyond the province. We had a very successful homecoming at all the students that had attended the schools here in town. We had an Incorporation Day Gala, which involved the council activities primarily. They sponsored that. I should mention that we prepared a centennial cookbook. That's also in our treasure box.
Many things have happened in Port Hawkesbury over the past number of years. With the closing of the Gulf Oil Refinery and heavy water plant, things were looking kind of bleak. But I can tell you, we've turned it around. There is a feeling of prosperity with new plants in the community, of which 3 are already operating, and another 3 will begin production in the next 4 to 18 months. Many present Port Hawkesbury businesses have renovated or expanded. We have 6 car dealerships and the prospect of a new town hall in 1989. So you can see why we are so anxious to welcome you back to Port Hawkesbury in 1989. Yes, 1989 was a time for a celebration. But let us look at those 100 years we were celebrating.
Sure, and that's the Embry shipyard. And this is a picture, this comes from the Nova Scotia Archives, the public archives. And that's the H.W. Embry and Son shipyard. Now this was taken, as far as the archives knows, this photograph was taken around May of 1899. And there's a yacht on the cradle up on the beach. And that was being built for a man named H.C. Carson. But when you look at it, you can see it's just at that exciting, magical moment when the ship is is hitting the water.
Sure does capture that.
That's right, and there's people even on the roofs, and I would imagine it's mostly young people on the roofs, I would think. Dignitaries are there, the women in their long flowing skirts. This would have been taken before the First World War, because, or perhaps just as the First World War was starting, but the shipyard burned, this particular one burned somewhere around 1917.
Renowned artist Frank Wright paints an early waterfront scene. It is described by Mayor Almon Chisholm.
We wanted a painting that would show Granville Street, the waterfront, as it would be a few years ago. And if you look closely at the painting, you know, you can see houses that are there today, and the painting is taken from a couple of pictures that we had back in the 1910s, the early 1900s, and it was a busy waterfront.
In the early decades of this century, 3 fish plants operated in Port Hawkesbury. The first of these, North Atlantic Fisheries, was established in 1912. The plant burned in 1913, but it was considered so important to the area that the town council offered tax considerations to rebuild. The company accepted the offer and rebuilt immediately. Soon, this plant was purchased by Leonard Fisheries. Another plant was built by National Fish in 1917. While they were in operation, the fish plants employed more people than any other industry up to that time. Let's look at this period, the 20s, 30s to 1942, when the last fish plant closed. Angus Walker has interesting memories of this large employer.
Yeah, the maritime fisheries were located on either side of the railroad tracks. The main fish plant was next to the waterfront. The generating plant was on the upper side of the track, and their ice house. Fishing vessels come into maritime about once a week, and so to Leonard Fisheries. Leonard Fisheries was a larger plant. It was 4 stories high, with freezing compartments, and they had their own trawlers coming in there, and besides vessels fishing off the Grand Banks.
Hughie MacInnis shares his memories of the fish operations with us.
Well, the fish plants, they created a lot of employment. The National Fish Company, they had a hotel right across the street near where the Black and White is now. And all the workers from the fish plant, they boarded there. They called it the National Fish Hotel at that time. It's probably 30 or 40 rooms, and they had a lot of fish trawlers, local people here working on their fish trawlers, you see, both companies. Then in the winter time, it was a big thing to get those 2 fish plants. They cut ice off of the pond. One pond out here, we call it Davis's Dam, right below the senior citizens place there. The National Fish, they cut ice there, and they'd store it in huge warehouses down here, because that's the only refrigeration they had, you see. And the Leonard Fish Plant, they cut their ice on the pond down below where Ralph Sellers had his place down there. And that was big business. It went on from probably November. It would start sometime before Christmas, and it would be going till the last of March.
Other memories of the fish plants are shared with us by Art Langley.
The name of the other Leonard person at the time. But there were several hundred people working at those fish plants, and they had smacks going along the coast collecting fish to be processed here, as well as some of the Lunenburg fishing fleet would fish and land their fares here, and they also had trawlers.